Well, listen, it is a great honor for me to be here in Japan with you. First of all, I am so honored to be the Chief of Naval Operations and to lead our Navy and to lead warfighters like yourself is the greatest privilege that I could ever have given to me. And so it's an incredible opportunity. I'm going to speak just a little bit and tell you a little bit about my vision and kind of what I'm trying to do in the Navy. And then we're going to get right to the Q&A because I want to hear from you. But first of all, I just want to say thank you. As a person who served over 40 years in the Navy, and I'm thinking like 40 years, that's like older than most of you. I know what it's like to be forward deployed, okay? And regardless if you got your family here or not, it's still a long way from the United States. And as Admiral Finnegan said, it is the tip of the spear. I don't know of anyone in the Navy that is not envious of being part of U.S. 7th Fleet because of the mission that you do here and how vitally important it is to the national defense of our country. And this is the center of gravity of that right here. And I think Blue Ridge sailors, any in here? Raise your hand. All right, getting underway today. So really, I know that's being part of this all-hands call with everything going on. I really appreciate that. I think the Annapolis is here. Any Annapolis sailors here? In here? See, it's a typical bunch of submariners are all like hidden on their ship. And so anyway, I think they're maybe getting underway today as well. But thank you for being here, okay? I know it's disrupted from your day-to-day schedule, but I don't get a chance to talk with you often. As the CNO, I made a decision when I got the call to actually fill this position that I was going to be a CNO that focused on sailors. I was 100% committed to that. So I have a sailors first mantra, and it is a line of effort that is beyond the rest of the things that I'm working on. It is, and the reason for that is that I realize that the top companies in the world, and certainly the United States Navy is one of those, if all the things they focus on and have to focus on is taking care of their people. You know, a lot of times the Navy, when people think of the United States Navy, you know, in their mind, when a person from the United States, you say Navy, what they think of is the incredible aircraft carriers sailing through the ocean with planes taking off, maybe a submarine surfacing through the water, maybe a missile coming off a DDG. It's platform-centric. But as all of you know in here, at the heart of every single thing going on, from preventive maintenance to a tag-out, to pushing a button to launch a missile, to painting the ship, everything requires the folks in this room. And so you are my priority. And so the goal of the Master Chief Petty Officer Navy and the CNO is to make that perfectly clear. And we want to improve a couple things that I want to talk to you about. First, we want to make sure that your competency is at the highest level it can possibly be. We want to make sure your character is at the highest level it can possibly be. And when you combine competency and character together, what you get is a level of confidence that transcends a level that you just can't generate any other way. And when you're confident, you're bold. You make bold decisions. You're aggressive. You're a warrior. You take things on that you normally wouldn't take on. And what has to underpin that is a mastery of your trade. That's what underpins all of that. When the captain of your ships look at you, or the captains of your commands look at you, they need to see somebody they can give an order to and have complete confidence that can be carried out. I owe you the ability to make sure you have the opportunity to gain that level of mastery. Okay? I think of you as world-class athletes. Okay? The housing I provide for you ought to be commensurate with that of a world-class organization. The food that we prepare for you and the menu, the actual type of food we give you is actually something I think about. That's what you do when you think of somebody as a world-class athlete. Okay? The level of training and the quality of that training needs to be at the NFL level. Okay? Because at the end of the day, I'm asking you to go into harm's way and conduct lethal operations. That's an incredible responsibility you have. And so to do that, I think I have to do my part to make sure that that's done. I do that through three things. And you may have seen this in some of the products I've put out already. I think of the Navy as the foundry. And the foundry, I just got to tour part of our foundry at SRF Japan. How many people are in here from SRF? Okay. That's part of our foundry. Our foundry is where we actually forge the Navy that we operate. That can be at repair facilities. That can be at our schoolhouses. Okay. That can be, the piers, the installation. Okay, that can be our galleys. That can be everything that's associated with how we launch our Navy and go to sea. And so that has been under-resourced for decades. It's been under-resourced for decades. I'm trying to change that. You spend at least 50% of your time in the foundry, and it needs to be at a level that actually can produce the Navy that we need. Our most decisive instrument of national power is the second thing, and that's our fleet. Okay? It's our fleet. We fight as fleets in the Navy. Okay? We may disperse those and distribute that power around the ocean, but at the end of the day, the construct by which we build our warfighting naval capability is through a fleet model. And a numbered fleet is certainly one of those models. Okay? So we fight as a fleet. So it's extremely important for that fleet to be ready. It has to be ready. So I spare no expense to making sure that we're ready. Okay? And that goes to the things we do when you go to sea, like training events, certification events, making sure repair parts are in the supply lockers, making sure technical work documents are there, making sure the reach-back support you need is robust. Okay? You have to sustain operations at sea, and to do that, you got to be ready. Okay? And then the third thing is the way we fight. If you want to win a war against a peer competitor, you have to know how to fight. When you join the Navy, you may not even realize it, but at the end of the day, we are in a profession of arms. And it perhaps is the oldest and most noble profession. And you actually got to be able to know what you're doing to actually do that well. You've got to see a little snippet of that, of just a tip of the iceberg of that in the Red Sea. Okay? You're seeing a combat power delivered there in the Red Sea against the Houthi rebels there. You're seeing what a DDG can do offensively and defensively. You're seeing what an air wing can do offensively. So you're seeing just within a little bit of a petri dish of what you do every day in that one little body of water, you can imagine what a fleet can do when I unleash it at full scale. Okay? So that's what I'm talking about. So that takes training, reps, okay? Reps and sets to build the muscle memory to know how to do that. So when you're being attacked or you need to attack, you know what to do. All right? And that's where I need all of your head engaged. You're in a hostile part of the world, okay? This is the pacing threat area of the world right here, okay? You're in it. You sail in it every day. When you get underway, you're in it immediately. There's no transit time to it. And so you have to be prepared all the time for that. And you have to make us hold the line on making sure that your ships and the support facilities here that support underway operations keep you at that readiness. I'll finish off and just tell you, I do that through these four things, okay? And I tell you this because I want you to spread the word on what I'm talking about. Number one, battle-ready sailors, okay? Battle-ready sailors, my number one priority. Number two, battle-ready ships, battle-ready forces. Battle-ready, they have to be ready. The third thing is, and it's a responsibility I have as a CNO, is the force today and tomorrow. The force today and tomorrow. You know, I think maybe as General Mattis said, you go to war with the fleet you have, the forces you have. I can't change that fundamentally in a day. But I do have to look downrange at what the Navy needs to look like to meet the threats that are coming downrange. Okay? Those threats are evolving very quickly. That's why you're seeing the emphasis in artificial intelligence, the emphasis in machine learning and large language models, the emphasis in the unmanned systems, the emphasis in adaptability and scalability and modularity. All of that remains, it gives us the capability to remain very flexible and high in conflict. Our big capital platforms that we utilize every day will always be part of our Navy in any foreseeable future that I see, but part of that has to be enabled, amplified, catalyzed, if you will, by these other type of enabling features. Part of that is certainly in cyberspace and space itself. So if you're part of those communities of practice, you know, you're in the right place. And then the last thing is global integration. We can't do anything without integration. We have to integrate with Japan here locally, one of our greatest partners, by far. In fact, it's probably missed in the continental United States how close we are with Japan, how close that is. You know, we tend to be kind of European focused in our mental models. But we are extremely tight with our host country here. We do everything with them, and they fight alongside us every day. So you ought to be very proud of that relationship and never allow that to have any chink in the armor. You are ambassadors in this country, and so make sure you respect that very well. But it's not just with countries we have to globally integrate with. We have to also integrate with the joint force. Okay? We have to integrate with the joint force. We will never win a high-end conflict as a Navy alone. It takes a multidimensional, multi-spectrum, multi-community, multi-service approach to bring the mass, timing, and tempo to win high-end conflict. So when you're out there doing things and you're working with the Air Force, you're working with Japan, you're working with Korea, you're working with Australia or other partners in the area, and you're working with this as a joint force, keep in mind that that's necessary to actually win, okay, that global integration. And so just keep that in the forefront as you're doing those things, and you'll understand kind of the fabric of why we take on the mission set the way we do and how we actually fight. And so I want to thank you for all you do. I look forward to your questions. I want to go ahead and say now, happy Thanksgiving, happy holidays, because I probably, won't get a chance to say it again to you in person. But from the bottom of my heart, it's a true honor to be the Chief of Naval Operations. I want you to know that you are the center of gravity for me, and I look forward to hearing your questions. So thank you. And these questions go to me or the MCPON, and I'll definitely allow him to actually weigh in on any question I can't answer, and you can ask him things directly as well. So please, first question. I know somebody's got one. Now's not the time to be shy. Go ahead and go to the mic so people can hear you.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
My name is Chief Veach, and I'm here from CNSU Westpac. I have a question for you today over the administrative side of the house, right? Over the past 5 years, I've had to pursue 5 separate issues totaling $60,000 in back pay and entitlement restorations through the BCNR, with one escalated through federal claims court at this point that's cost me almost $20,000 in legal fees. Now, I'm not here to ask you to fix those issues because I understand that's outside the scope of your job. Working through these issues has given me visibility into systemic failures in our pay, entitlements, administrative process, and legal compliance mechanisms that impact sailors fleet-wide who rely on these systems every day. I've exhausted most formal corrective avenues working through some of these issues, from the deck plates to the policy owners, resulting in no changes being made. In my view, sir, this is exactly the kind of deck plate problem-solving Get Real, Get Better was designed for, and there seems to be no clearly identified mechanism for deck plate feedback, policy conflicts, or systemic failures to reach your level, CNP, or the responsible directorates for review and correction without Inspector General or congressional intervention. My question for you, sir, is what is the official process for the deck plate to elevate issues and propose solutions to your staff or to CNP?
Okay, wow. That's comprehensive.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to try to break that apart a bit, okay? Because there was a lot there. One of the things I heard is general pay. So let me talk about that a little bit. Far be it from me to try to advocate and applaud the Navy pay system, or maybe even I could say the Armed Forces pay system. It's a fairly bureaucratic, accountable system. It moves at snail speed, and when it makes an error in their favor, it doesn't move very quickly. When it makes an error in your favor, it's lightning quick, okay? Maybe something you've seen. When I was the commander at U.S. Fleet Forces Command, I worked with the CNO at the time to actually try to kick off what we called a fleet sprint on this topic. And that fleet sprint was designed to identify a lot of problems that you've laid out in pay. At the time, we had thousands of sailors that had pay problems, okay? Mm-hmm. We had pay systems that did not liquidate PCS travel in any kind of effective way, okay? And so things would go forever. The onus on the sailor to generate what we call these key supporting documents, this list of objective quality evidence. So, it's like a nuclear work package. So you get to your command, and you got to go generate all these receipts and all these things, and so there was this structure that was out there that was clearly obvious as a fleet commander that I knew we needed to fix. So we approached that through a lot of different ways. I'm not going to go into that because I'm going to get to the heart of it. I don't have time because I want to get to a lot of questions. But at the end of the day, we were able to put a pretty big dent in sailor pay. So if I ask for a show of hands, how many people have a pay problem in this room? Okay. So maybe about, 2% have a pay problem. So I think that's the result of that body of work. It's CPPA, it's policy changes, qualifications, working better, just putting heat and light on the thing and trying to get after it. So, but where do I want to go with that? And then I'll get to your feedback question. How many times do you think somebody has actually PCS'd to Yokosuka, Japan in the history of the Navy? You think that's a pretty frequent thing? Do you think I should be able to, like, before I PCS, wherever I'm coming from, go to some computer, type my name, my family members, where I'm originating, where I'm going, hit enter, and with near certainty, with that database underpinning that, know what I should be entitled to from a financial aspect to like 98%?
Yes, sir.
Wouldn't it be easier just to go ahead and get that 98% deposit in your account before you actually move? And then we kind of maybe reconcile any kind of odd thing that you've got special to you at the end game once you're there.
Yes, sir.
So using, again, this artificial intelligence model to actually do pay is something I'm working on very hard. So that we just go ahead and do it ahead of time. You know, we know that number with such specificity. And then if you end up kind of taking a different route, I don't care. I just don't care. You're just going to get that money based on this historic way we would go generate that numerical value. And so I want to pay you in front, and then if there's something, you know, you did something weird en route, you're a one-off, then I kind of handle that. So you can kind of see that as the future where we're going. Now to the question of how you feed back to me, well, you can just go to the global and send me an email, okay? I mean, that's, you know, I'm in there, okay? Your chain of command may like fuss at you if you do it that way, so you do that at your own risk, but you will short circuit the system that way. What I prefer that you do is at the end of the day, in all of your cases, there is no human being more important than your commanding officer. And so if you're telling me there's a problem, you know, within a command in getting things to the commanding officer through that mechanism on your ship, for the COs that are listening to me right now, take that on. That's unacceptable. Your commanding officer is the door-opening human being that actually gets your concern vetted to the ISIC that they work for, okay? Perhaps to the type commander that's in that chain of command, to the personnel command. That's who does it. They're in communication in those lanes. So if that feedback mechanism is not healthy there, then that's where that needs to start. My expectation would be that would be exposed through, you know, general all-hands calls being done at command. That ought to be something you're emailing your chain of command that's a problem. DOC surveys would be, you know, part of the feedback mechanism for that. And but I would say be a demanding sailor on making sure those lines of communication up to your commanding officer are healthy. And because this question has got some size to it, I want Mick Pond to add anything that you think I may have not captured there, Mick Pond.
Well, you know, I think you did cover all of the relevant pieces. So, you know, my Navy Career Center is the other place, you know, where it's kind of your first stop individually that you have to go to. And if it's not getting resolved there, much like the CNO said, I am also in the global. But your CMC and your CO are the entries into the feedback mechanism for the entire system. Okay.
Thank you for the question.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning, sir. Lieutenant Hagerman from SRF Yokosuka. Sir, one of the major problems that's been being plagued by the maintenance and operational community is the CANAP culture we have. A lot of times we're seeing a lack of abundance in the parts in the supply system, whether that's parts locked behind proprietary information from the manufacturer or just grown to be obsolete. And in some cases, this is impacting the primary warfare areas of our forward deployed assets to the point where if we were to surge all assets right now, a lot of them would be unable to effectively execute their mission. So I'd like to ask what your team and what Congress is doing to try to turn around the supply system and really tackle this CANAP culture that's grown exponentially in the past 6 years I've been in the Navy. Well,
thank you for that. I mean, that is like such an insightful question. It really is. It's at the heart. I track 5 things. I try to. I'm still trying to get my team to show it in a way that's effective for me. And that's always a little bit of a tooth-pulling event. But I try to track 5 things. And I mentioned this when I was confirmed. It is my goal when I end my tenure as CNO that there are no gaps at sea. Okay, so I'm working on making sure that we have our ships, submarines, squadrons, all fully manned to the right level. So that's one that I'm actually working on. I work on this all the time. Okay. The second thing is we have a massive backlog of repair parts. Okay. It shouldn't be lost on anyone that at the end of a fiscal year, you actually have to figure out how to pay the bills sometimes. And you write checks on certain things to do that. You dip into different accounts to go reconcile what is a challenging fiscal environment that we always kind of find ourselves in. Far too often where we write that check is in spare repair parts. So then that pushes that backlog to another fiscal year. So it kind of obfuscates the problem, but what it does is accumulates that problem over time. And we've gotten to a point now to where that number is substantial. It is a big number. So one of my goals, another thing I track is by the end of my tenure that number will be back to zero again. It's such a large number, I can't just solve it in one fiscal year. That's how big the problem you're describing truly is, okay? The third thing, I'm just going to go through these real quickly, just kind of so people hear them, is ordnance, okay? The amount of ordnance I have to win a conflict is woefully inadequate. And we have challenges across our standard missile set, our torpedo set, okay, our point defense systems. All of that needs to be put on steroids. The Deputy Secretary of War has taken this on with a special group, this munitions acceleration committee, if you will. So he recognizes it, he's in charge of this, but this is an all-hands event to get the defense industrial base partners who build our ordnance up on plane to make good on the contracts we've already let and to actually accelerate that and give us more ordnance, okay? Part of that's very similar to the supply problem as well, okay? So that's an issue. The fourth thing is training, okay? Training, I have a responsibility that what I've renamed Ready Relevant Learning to the continuous training continuum, thank you, is healthy. So that's A school, C school, special schools. All of that training is modernized and it's mapped to your career milestones in a way so that you get that training, the right type at the right time. And so we've identified thousands of gaps in where I've told the actual communities of practice out there that you should train a sailor in a certain thing, but there's nothing that really goes and does that, okay? And so that's a challenge. So if you notice, I think it was in my last C note, I talked about COSAL. Now to your specific point. The actual supply readiness for any platform can only be as good as the COSAL validation is, okay? We have short-circuited that system based on poor modeling, again, for a really long time. There's these things that does not give the right demand signal to the actual supply model in a way that actually generates the repair parts. So that's a problem. When you only have 300 ships, that's a small number actually. And when think within a community of like DDGs, like 87 DDGs, well, you can think if you're a small company who makes a gadget for me, and you've only got 87 ships that need this gadget, the viability of staying in business using that thing as your business model is pretty low, right? So we're in a constant fight that these small shops that basically have been subcontracted by our big primes no longer make these things. So then I've got to go take that gadget, re-engineer it, reverse engineer it, and have someone go make that. That's slow and laborious and time consuming. So I've got that challenge going as well. So that's kind of supply chain health. So there's a COSAL validation, making sure I know what needs to be on the ship, the right amount of it on the ship, the frequency in which it breaks, the prioritization of it based on its warfighting utility, and then I've got to make sure that the actual supply chain that delivers that healthy. That's all a big problem, and it's all, I think, well quantified. It's just getting after it. And that's where I'm trying to put some heat and light on it to get after it. Does that answer kind of some of the vision there of what I'm going on, what I'm trying to do? I mean, give me a follow-up there if I didn't get after what you're really trying to get after. Anything else on that?
The only thing I'd potentially add, sir, is some of the shipping times, even for regular parts in the supply system, do we have any measures to try to expedite those? We're estimating 30 days minimum for a lot of parts.
Yeah, the shipping, if it's coming if that's like just normal type of shipping, I can probably look into that for you, and I will. If it's the way you're moving things around in theater, then, you know, that's a prioritization by different people in this room on how that gets moved around. And so that's, you know, again, being a demanding customer for that. But I'll take that back and take a look at that and see if I can do something about the, you know, the general shipping timelines, how I get it into theater. Thank you.
Sir, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Lieutenant Justin Strauss. I work over at TPU Yokosuka. My question is solution-based and to talk about
Is this me? I'm just trying to get it, you know, in your pocket over there. Let me see.
My question is to try to get time back to sailors and leaders in the Navy. So we have a maze of web-based platforms, and some are antiquated, hard to use in some cases. What is the Navy's plan to get after this, to create perhaps a single, secure, modern, digital front door?
Okay. Be thinking of your answer too.
Yes,
I'll
sir.
kick this off. This is Mount Everest. I may not know of any company that does enterprise IT worse than us. That's not our skill. I mean, we blow things up really well, okay? But when it comes to enterprise IT, we have historically not done well there. The promise for, you know, My Navy HR, you know, NMRO, Log IT, you know, you name the large enterprise IT system, and I don't think we've delivered on that. You know, I remember going into INSEPs forever, and it said beta up there at the top. I was like, when is this thing ever not going to be beta? You know, it didn't even make any sense to me. So there is a concerted effort of trying to work on this. And I'm trying to figure out exactly the reason why we can't ever kind of get this defined and actually across the line. I think we historically have bidded this out, and at the end of the day, accepted the bid from a company where the due diligence to believe that they could deliver it was not where it should have been. There are companies out there that do this very well. There are Amazon Web Services and Google, right? And Microsoft. You know, there's lots of companies, so if I didn't mention one, forgive me out there, whoever was watching this. But at the bottom line is there are pros from Dover that do this extremely well. We should be able to set requirements, you know, for our, you know, ERP enterprise resource systems, right? Our customer relations enterprise systems. Set these conditions and these requirements, and then actually have somebody build that relatively easy. The fact we've not been able to do that, I think, is disappointing. Okay, so that's kind of that's not helping you, you know, kind of answer the question. But I just wanted to tell you that I do know this problem exists. On wasting people's time in this room. Okay, again, I took this on at Fleet Forces. And I brought it with me when I came to D.C. I am trying to eliminate all collateral duties. Okay, you may think like, really? How's that possible? Well, to me, collateral duties, to me, is and has always been kind of a workaround. You know, what it really tells me when I hear that is we don't have the primary duty of somebody defined correctly. You know, I can remember as a young submarine officer, we had this thing called the electrical safety officer as a collateral duty, which means that I went around with some electrician and we made sure that all the UL listed, you know, plugs for people's, you know, iPods were like, you know, tested or something. Well, to me, that's just part of the electrical officer's job. I don't really need that to be a collateral duty. So one line of effort is to go take these collateral duties, which ought to be somebody's primary duty, and just make that part of somebody's primary duty, okay? The second one is centralization, okay? And this is new for you, perhaps. How many urinalysis programs do you think I have in the Navy? Well, how many commands are in this room, okay? So, I mean, so imagine just in the, you know, on the waterfront alone here, it's the home of 7th Fleet, you probably got like 500 urinalysis programs, okay? How many should I have? Like one. So if your social security number ends in a 6, report to building 32 and P, okay? All right? Well, I mean, why is everyone running one of these things? So I have countless things like that. The PFA, right? PRT. I mean, why is everybody running that as an individual program? This is your birth month, report to the gym, do your plank, do your push-ups and run, right? Centralization to me is key. Most of the joint force does it this way already. We're just behind in it. And so sometimes I'll get well, how would I do that underway? You just don't do it underway, okay? If you think you got a drug problem underway, you got other problems, okay? So I'm not concerned about that. So I'm trying to centralize a lot of that. So at the end of the day, I'll end up with these statutory requirements. When I get rid of these kind of fluff collaterals, centralize a bunch of them, and then I'll end up with these ones that are kind of like in policy or law. Then to me, the way I consolidate that is I bin all those together and just make that a primary duty for somebody. That becomes the primary duty. So it goes back to kind of, my first assertion. And so that's kind of where I'm trying to go to actually eliminate some of the chaff that everybody has to deal with day to day. McPond.
Yeah, and so is this on? Yeah. I'll make sure it's closer. To your question about a modernized digital front door, to the boss's point, one of the things we've historically done is we take our really crappy paper process and just make it a computer process. And so that's the thing that's thwarted every effort we've tried to do in this area, from NP2 to NMRO. And when the new administration came in, DOGE came in, and they killed a bunch of all of our efforts in this area because they knew, like the boss said, we're terrible at it. And so the Secretary of War and OSW PNR, they have an effort going to kind of standardize digital processes across all departments, where we'll have kind of like one digital front door. I can tell you that our new CMP, Admiral Cherico, is very motivated and dedicated to improving us in this area. The first thing he's going after right now is are the local systems at MPC that run our advancement boards. Once he gets his data center right, the next one is this digital front door. So I think, it's not a very satisfying answer, but I think you'll see some pretty significant improvement in that area in the next year or so. Okay.
Thank you.
And good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Command Master Chief Harris from the Float Training Group, Western Pacific. Thank you for your time and your presence here today. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you this question, because I've had the chance to and the pleasure of asking this question to some of your predecessors. We're inside of or just outside of the 400-day mark of 2027. And we, of course, today have a lot of competing interests and priorities. From your perspective, where are we in terms of the talks of 2027 and prepare to fight tonight aspect? If you could speak on that a little bit.
Yeah, thank you for that. Previous CNOs have really emphasized that, even with countdown clocks and that kind of thing. I just don't view the problem like that. The way I view the problem is I need you ready tomorrow. I don't need you ready in 27. I need you ready 2 days from now, a month from now. So you're always running in a status that something could kick off in in this part of the world or globally any day. So, when I put something out there like that, a date like that, it almost gives me the impression, and you guys can push back on this, that like I'll get healthy out there at some point for something in the future. I need your head in it today. And so, will I be more capable in 27? Yes. So the bar will rise. And I need you to leverage that new found capability in 27. But that doesn't change the fact that today I need you ready. And if we miss the mark and nothing happens in 27, then what? Like I go like, whew, man, I'm like put my hair down. So I need you ready in 28, 29, 30. So my paradigm, the way I kind of view things is I want you all to believe that conflict is today, every day. And you're always at a state of readiness, and you're always describing risk up through your chain of command of what is preventing you to bring the full combat power of your vessel, airplane, submarine, whatever that might be, to bear every single day. So we have a standing understanding of what the delta is between what I need to do to make you 100%. That's what you owe me, okay? And you're integral to that as a Command Master Chief. And so I wouldn't think of it as 27. I'd think of it like in 10 minutes I may hear a siren go off. We're just always ready, okay, to the maximum level we can be. There is no kind of bank account out there. That's just not a thing. And so you should be wringing out the readiness of your crews. Again, like I told you, with sets and reps and training and checking their knowledge, building their competency, building their mastery, being a demanding customer for repair parts, first in line to go load out more ordnance. Be demanding there so that you're at the maximum state of readiness every single day. Okay? And that's what my expectation is. So don't think of 27, think 27 minutes. Okay? All right? All right.
Good morning, sir. LSS Haro from the USS Blue Ridge, and I have a big question when it comes to future planning, when it comes to the Navy, especially with the times we live in.
Say that part when it comes to?
Future planning when it comes to the times we live in.
What's he saying? Times we live in. Oh, times we live in. Got it.
All right. And the big question for me is, I know we have started the system or this ship called Littoral Combat Ship, or like basically a frigate. And I've heard rumors that program has been going haywire. I don't know if that's true. But the question is that is there still plans to make smaller ships cheaper than a destroyer in numbers? Because I know the times we live in, we have a big Navy by paper, but split in half when it comes to different areas of where we operate in the world. Mm-hmm. And we are facing navies out there that have all their ships in one place and able to kind of respond in case we get to a state of war.
Yeah. You remember that third line of effort I told you, kind of our force today and tomorrow? Your question is really at the center of that. One of the things I've got folks on my staff that does is really try to project with intelligence what, the threat's going to look like with some amount of uncertainty in that forecasting. And to land the capabilities that we need to match that threat in an affordable shipbuilding program is the constrained problem of basically the Pentagon. That's a big part of my job every day. Is there a role for a small surface combatant is kind of the heart of, one of the parts of your question. Absolutely. I can see no Navy that doesn't have a role for a small surface combatant, okay? But the reason for that, in my opinion, is when you want to actually mass lethal effect and you're a global Navy with global responsibilities, I have to look at the actual threat globally, not just here in the Western Pacific. But I have a very tough problem here in the Western Pacific. So if I can conceivably offload threats that are lesser than what you're facing out here to small surface combatants to handle that, very capable ship, but more in line with that threat profile, to allow more force flow to here with larger, more capable platforms, then that's just common sense, good business for me. And so, you can think of some of the things we're doing down in 4th Fleet, and in our Southern Command area of operations. Some of the stuff we do in 6th Fleet, 5th Fleet, things in the high north. I think all have strong small surface combatant roles. And then that allows me to concentrate high-end, capabilities in the area where that type of capability is needed most. So I do see that's a thing that I would advocate for. And so survivability matters, payload matters. The volume of, payload volume is everything to a ship. So getting that kind of at the right balance point to make an affordable ship that I can produce at scale very quickly, but make it very capable on what we learned from Littoral Combat Ship. We learned a lot there, trust me. First of all, don't make a ship out of aluminum, okay? Like point one. Point two, make sure it's built organically with some lethality. That's just, it's just kind of SOP. But we learned a lot there. And the Littoral Combat Ships do a lot of great missions right now. Here in this theater, 5th Fleet, down in 4th Fleet as well. So there's plenty of work for everybody. But I think the recapitalization of small surface combatants is a necessary thing that I need to do. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning, McPon. MCSN Fonts from the USS Blue Ridge. What does a resolution look like with the war on Venezuela? As a sailor from Venezuela, the conflict in the Caribbean hits close to home. So I'm just concerned with how you see that progressing.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to that directly because, these things are presidential and SecWar level decisions on utilization of our combat force in that area of responsibility. But what I can say that I think it'd be fair to say that there will be a persistent defense of the homeland mission for our Navy, and that will be Western Hemisphere. So I can't say the extent to what, naval force will be in that theater. I mean, we're at pretty much an all-time high right now, but I think it would be naive for me to tell you anything other than we're going to have a persistent and consistent presence in the southern area of operations and Western Hemisphere under the current administration. The president takes, counter illicit trafficking extremely seriously, and countering narco trafficking is obviously part of that. And so, but operations, to your specific question, vis-a-vis Venezuela, I can't speak to that. But I think you can expect naval force to be in that area, going forward. That's going to be a standing operation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, sir. I'm CS3 Shiliski from the USS Blue Ridge. My question is there any plans on modernizing or replacing the older ships within the fleet?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think the fact you have to ask that gives me an insight into how bad our shipbuilding is. I mean, that's a standing line of operation for us. And, so we have, contractually a bunch of ships under contract right now. And getting that on steroids is a goal of the Secretary of the Navy, a goal of mine. And because if you go plot this out, you can just Google this. You look at the size of the U.S. Navy historically over the last 20 plus years, we flatlined. I mean, we are building at a rate that we decommission. So the actual size of the Navy is relatively about 300 ships and hasn't significantly changed. I mean, I have a requirement for 355 and a battle force assessment from my own staff of 387. So if I want to get an additional 87 ships, in the Navy registry, while I'm also decomming ships that are, past their useful service life, I've got to turn the volume up here. So part of my visit here is to talk with partners about this very thing. I just came from Korea and visiting 2 shipyards there. I intend to talk about that with the leadership here in Japan. And we're just all partners. This is an all hands on deck effort. And I think there is a general consensus congressionally with the administration and certainly within the Pentagon that this is something that we can all get behind, is shipbuilding. And so this needs to be more of a how do we do it versus if we do it. So yes, we are committed to replacing older ships with newer ships. And of course the ones that are still got plenty of service life, a robust modernization plan to make sure they're capable at the extent that they can be improved through that modernization process. If you're involved with modernizing a ship here, that's historically been a weakness of ours. And I won't say that's true here, but generally, we're supposed to turn a 36-month OFRP, not for deployed naval forces, but CONUS-based ships. And what's always limited that a bit is the ships that are in modernization not coming out on time. And so that's a challenge for us. But we're committed to modernizing, make sure that we are fielding the best and most capable ships that we can. I started off with telling you, you're the special sauce that makes us world class, the enduring value of our Navy, but you still need good kit, okay? You still need good kit, and I'm committed to that. Thank you.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, MCPON. I'm Machinery Repairman, 2nd class from USS Higgins. I have a question on, it's hard to word it, but after the current administration took office, there was policies placed upon the department for more or less discharge of sailors due to gender. Is there a implementation that could be more aligned with the overall consensus of the nation, as we are a very mixed and integrated nation? So is there a more
just way to implement this policy or not implement this policy?
John, you want to take a stab at that?
Thanks. I just want to make sure, I just want to make sure I understand your question. Are you talking about sailors with gender dysphoria specifically, or are you talking about gender, because you just said gender, so I just want to make sure I
That is to be correct. So gender dysphoria, such as our trans sailors,
Yeah.
no person's gender should disqualify them from being a sailor.
Yeah, and so I think if you're asking if I think the current office of the Secretary of the Department of War will change their policy on that between now and the end of this administration, the answer is no. Right? They've made a decision that gender dysphoria as a medical condition is disqualifying. So I do not see that changing in the next several years probably, and maybe longer. They've just made that policy decision, and it is what it is.
Disappointing here, but I appreciate the candor.
Yep, absolutely.
Good morning, sir. McPawn. This is CS1 Rahiles from USS Ralph Johnson. Due to the ongoing changes for the being SEM, RK, BBA, my question, sir, is what about for all those E6 that already board eligible? Are we able to plan eliminate the E6 advancement exam either next year or in the near future? Could you share your insight on ongoing discussion long-term for the advancement process?
Yeah, so I will tell you, as long as I am your MCPON, that advancement exam is not going to go away. All right, so now I will share with you that I generally believe our advancement exam process is broken, right? And I would like to fundamentally change the way we approach that exam. And I think billet-based advancement gives us an opportunity to do that with the RKE, the rating knowledge exam. I don't know. Right now, the way our exam works, right, is I hand most of you a 30-page bibliography and say, good luck, and then I ask you a bunch of really obscure things out of some tech manual you may have never seen before. And I just don't think that's the right way to test your knowledge and your readiness to serve at the next higher pay grade. The other thing I'm not in love with is the fact that we grade on a curve. The way our passing, for E5 and E6 exams, the way we set that score, weirdly enough, is, let's say, if you were to randomly fill in every oval, you would get about a 30, right? I mean, they do some science. And then I set the passing grade at 35, which means like if you do slightly better than randomly guessing on the exam, you're eligible to advance. And I just don't think that's the proper way to approach that. So advancement exams are not going to go away, and during my time as MCPON, I'm going to try to change the way we approach the advancement exams to make them more representative of what I actually need, what knowledge I want proven to us before we advance you to the next higher pay grade. Does that make sense?
It's much cheap. Thank you.
Okay.
Good morning, sir. McBond. Chief Petty Officer Johnson from the USS John Finn. My question is on topside preservation. With the increased emphasis on focus on topside preservation, does the Navy have a plan to contract a more rust-resistant paint, for example, lead-based paint, and if not, procure more painting materials, especially for ships that are underway who are at constant war with the enemy of rust?
So in the room here, how many people does that question impact? That's what I call high return on value. It is a fantastic question, and it is an irritant to me, okay? No one wants their ship to look rusty. No one. There is no crew that wants that. There's no captain that wants that. And I can assure you there's no leadership in the Pentagon that wants it. And so, when I go after this, what I find is just so many things that are in there. Paint systems that are not well designed, which are definitely state-of-the-art paint applications that are infinitely better than what we use today, and we're trying to get after that, okay? But at the heart of it is really fasteners. I mean, what is it that's rusting? At the heart of it, you'll probably find is probably a fastener. And so one of the things that I think you can do really quick is just I'm trying to work with NAVC to just topside, let's just go get these problematic fasteners that are corroding where the rust runs, and then of course it gets all over the deck in in this pattern that actually you see, because that's just happening, very slowly over time, and then by the time you pull back in, it looks terrible. Let's get after the materials of some of these critical fasteners. They would be a pretty cheap way to go after that, okay? And then the last thing is paint application and making sure we actually know what we're doing. If you're like me, painting is like getting paint and painting, okay? And so there's a lot more to it. And so typically that's kind of what we do is, I'm not sure that we, have the science of painting dialed in correctly, that making sure that when we actually go expend the sailor effort to go do this when we're actually focused. I'm not talking about touch-up stuff like trying before you come in so you're not an eyesore kind of stuff. I'm talking like no kidding getting after it. That there's a science to painting. And it does take a team of people that we used to have in these spruce barges and people whose expertise was in ensuring that the actual prep was done correctly, the humidity was done correctly, the application of the primer was right, and then the application of the top coat or the non-skid was done correctly. All of that needs to get looked at. And I've directed all that. The Vice Chief of Naval Operations, he's SWO, as you know, Jim Kilby, he's helping me with this to make sure we kind of attack exactly the problem that you're getting at and that you're discussing. But I can just tell you then, it's in everyone's best interest though, till I get that nut cracked, to not look like you need to be painted, okay? And that's a all hands kind of approach on that. So be prideful of your ship the way it looks, help the chain of command get after that, and making sure that the maximum extent possible that, when you're in a high visibility situation, that your ship looks world class. No one wants to look at the U.S. Navy and think like, oh my God, is that some third world Navy? And so they don't understand that corrosion products on decks or down the side of the ship doesn't necessarily diminish the combat power of the ship, but the aesthetics of the ship certainly matter. And so that matters to me as well. I'm just being very pragmatic with you. So while we get after this fasteners, paint treatment, and how to paint in a more holistic way, I'll just tell you, keep your ship shape to the maximum extent you can. Anything?
Yeah, so I just wanted to follow up on your one point about making sure you had materials on board. Is there a paintbrush and roller shortage, or what was the specific question there?
The actual paint.
Oh, the actual paint. Okay. I mean,
We'll take that.
Question.
I'll take that. Yeah, if there's an issue with that,
yeah.
Make sure that's not an each's thing, but if there's a general shortage of paint, that's like I'm shooting my own foot. So I'll get after that.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Coffee and paint, that's a Navy thing. All right.
Good morning, sir. Mick Pond. I'm CTRSN Servitus from the USS Ralph Johnson. Earlier you touched on prioritizing a sailor quality of life, and I wanted to ask you, how do you plan on accomplishing that?
Well, basically knuckling under my staff, okay? The Pentagon is a special place. And, when you get there, it's like, people always kind of give you it's great to be out of that building. That's because at the end of the day, what it really likes to focus on are capabilities. The entire machine is geared around capability. That's because there's this intimate relationship between, the decision makers in the building, the people who've got the money, the defense industrial base, congressional constituents. All of that is about building things and contracting and all that. So it just has this bias, this natural bias on capability. And trying to get the rudder over on that paradigm is proven to be more challenging for me than I thought. But I'm pretty tough, okay? I'm staying the course on this. So hopefully you've seen here, and we're working on this, and the leadership down here on the front row is working this, making sure no sailor lives on a ship, okay? Now there's constraints there that if you're geo-bachelor, that I'm trying to come through the understanding if you're in that situation, how to, affect that too. Getting paid on time, I mentioned that already, okay? Uniform availability. I mean, this gentleman works on that all the time. When you go to the NEX and there's no pants in your size, that's an issue. So there's this whole thing with quality of life, and some of those things fall into medical and daycare, making sure those capacities are there. Again, we talked about galleys, food service, the way we actually serve is being looked at, make sure it's modern. But then there's also kind of quality of work. And I haven't touched a lot on that, but that's, using good information technologies on board your ship, making more things, YouTube based. We're working on that all the time to increase the amount of that. How you actually do reach back support with some virtual reality, those types of technologies. I'm telling you, we're just like at the tip of the iceberg on this. I need people that are smart like you to give me feedback on the quality of work side. I think I've got a pretty good handle on the quality of life things. That's barracks and all those things that we can do. What I really want to move the needle on is how I make you more effective at sea. You all should be offended, and I mean this, listen, this is important. If you cannot fix your own ship and you've got to call back for help, you should be offended by that. Now you may find that you find yourself in that situation and there's just nothing you can do. But you should really, no kidding, critique why you were not able to do that yourself. There is nothing special about anything ashore than what I've built at sea. Okay? It's just not. And if it is, I need to go fix that, and you need to tell me what I need to fix. Is it the captain not willing to take the risk to go get into that system with the sailors on board his or her ship? Is it the chief petty officer is not at a competency level that they need to be to direct and oversee that because we just haven't built that human being correctly? Is it the repair parts in the lockers is not there? You know what you need, it's just not available? Is it the technical work document not built in a way that you can easily follow that, troubleshoot, and actually do it yourself? I want to get out of all this reach back, okay? Reach back does not equal combat readiness, okay? Me flying a person out to your ship, I want to eliminate that. I want to drive that to zero. And so that's why when I talk about competency, that's where I want us to really fundamentally improve on that. Any comments on that?
Well, I think everything the boss said, I think, to your question, I think what you'll see is his willingness to fund the things to do that stuff, right? And so, for the last 20, 30 years, as long as I've been in the Navy, we have not funded the quality of life stuff. Now, we didn't get here in a year. It's going to take multiple fit-ups to fix a lot of things that are wrong in the Navy. But I think what you'll see that from the CNO is a commitment to fund those things in a curve that gets them healthy sooner rather than later. All right, so that's his and my commitment to you is that you will, people often say like talk is cheap. Where you put your money is how you show me what you really value. I think you'll see from this CNO, the money will demonstrate that he really believes that sailors are first in this Navy.
And I will say on the last point on this that I know I've got a commitment on that from Admiral Gray, who is Commander Naval Installation Command, and I've got a commitment on that from Admiral Cherico, who is Chief of Naval Personnel. They are on this. They understand my vision. They understand the priorities. I've just now got to balance the books, okay, to get after it. And I wish it wasn't so, but it's just a pragmatic fact. But I have your voice, okay? I'm taking it and I understand it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, McPon. My name is Fire Controlman Aegis 2nd Class Bassam James Salhai, and I'm stationed on board the best ship in the Navy, USS Higgins, DDG 76.
Nice.
Sir, first off, I would like to let you know that I was a sailor who utilized the full power Navy engagement to get out of Norfolk and get stationed overseas, and that is an amazing program, and I hope you will always keep it going. One of the growing concerns amongst junior sailors is that, I'm going to hold this, this is really low. One of the growing concerns amongst junior sailors is that while the billet-based advancement program, as I'm sure you're very proud of, has done a very good job at filling manning at sea. The Navy is doing a very good job at manning right now, and I commend you on that. However, for a second-class sailor like myself who was looking forward to taking the Navy-wide advancement exam and having the opportunity to advance to the pay grade of E6 on board my current ship, there's a growing concern that the opportunities for advancement without taking another set of orders has become extremely limited for sailors. While billet-based advancement is very good for filling these gaps in manning, and in many cases will reward sailors by giving them an advancement when they take their next set of orders, potentially to orders that some may consider as less desirable. I'm wondering how you address the concern about sailors advancing while on board their current duty station.
I'm gonna let Mick Pond answer this, but I want to tell you this is actually a topic he and I talk about a lot. And when you create a new thing like billet-based advancement, you create different seams. You solve one problem, and you do create some other things that have to be worked out over time. I think the question's timely, and I understand it. I've got a son-in-law that's an FCA 1 on a ship out of Mayport, so I love the rate. And thanks for your service on Higgins. But I want Mick Pond to answer the specific way that we're trying to address this concern of how the billet-based advancement process may have actually introduced the actual thing you're talking about.
Yeah, so, billet-based advancement in its current instantiation. So, there's a lot of people who think the DMAP, the 4+3 is BBA. It's not, right? So DMAP was kind of the precursor to billet-based advancement. Billet-based advancement is not 4+3, right? So inside of BBA for the ratings that are in that, shore duty and sea duty are available, right? And there is opportunity with the latest NAVADMIN to advance at your current command under ARA or CA2P. So those opportunities exist. One of the things that we knew going into BBA that we would have to fix is the billet base. All right, and what I mean by that is, the sea duty and shore duty opportunities in rate for a lot of ratings are not balanced appropriately. All right, and so we know we have to fix that. It's a CMP right now is conducting what they call a zero billet base review, because the CNO and I believe that sea-shore flow, sea duty, shore duty balance is 3 years and 3 years. All right, we got a bunch of ratings that can't do that, but we believe that that's where it should be. And so we're going through reviewing that to take care of the problem you're talking about. It's just going to take a little bit of time to get through it, but we are aware of it. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you, Pastor.
Okay.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, Mick Pond. I'm Ensign Conway with NAVFAC Far East. My question for you today is, given the current budget constraints in the Navy, what efforts are being pushed through in the Pentagon and other government agencies to fund both installation improvements and fleet modernization?
It's a prioritization thing, just like you can imagine with your own personal financial budget. I'll just tell you how I view the world, and sometimes I get my way and sometimes I don't. Sometimes as the budget moves up through the Secretariat, there's changes. Sometimes when it gets to War, there's changes. Sometimes when it gets to OMB, there's changes, and sometimes there's changes when it gets to Congress. So it's complicated. There's a lot of stakeholders involved in there, and so I try to land it in a very logical way, and this is how I land it. When my direction for my team to build the Navy budget is first this thing I'll call the core. And the core, at the top of the core is the foundry. Okay, and I've told you about what that is. So you just got to pay that. That's like you're getting in money. I need to go pay that foundry at the heart, of doing that. The second one is readiness. I told you, to the question about 2027, I have to be ready today. As the Admiral said, you're at the tip of the spear. It's a today thing. So that means he has to have confidence that every unit he's in command of is ready to bring combat power. So I have to have readiness paid for. Okay, so foundry, readiness, and then the third thing in the core bin is strategic deterrence. Okay? At the heart of everything we do has an implicit assumption that the United States is not under strategic attack. When you're under strategic attack, okay, that changes everything. It changes the continuity of government, continuity of operations, continuity of decision making. So that's a not allowed condition, all right? And the way we ensure to the Navy's maximum extent that we are not ever under strategic attack is by fielding our sea-based strategic deterrent. So that's core. And then after that, what I do is I look at the kill chain, literally, okay? I don't want to be targeted. All right? So I want to invest in counter-targeting. All right? I want to be able to target. So I invest in targeting. All right? And then if I'm not targeted, that probably means I'm going to be survivable, and I know where my targets are, then I've got to have ordnance to actually deliver the kill blow, right? So then that comes fires. And I know as soon as I start shooting, I'm probably going to get shot at, so I got to be able to defend myself. So I need strong point defense and layer defense on that. And then I have to be able to rearm, resupply, and replenish, so that comes down to our logistics, and it will be in a contested environment. So if you think about what I just laid out, that's how I spend $1. So every time I get $1, I kind of spend it in, in that kind of fashion. So at the heart of it, that's my scheme. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Good morning, sir. Mick Pond, how do you do? I'm CTT1 Hettinger, working out of SRF. My question is more leaning towards what you were talking about earlier with the modernization of training, as well as what you referenced with the cutting down reach back. I'm not entirely sure how widespread this is in the Navy, but I have found within my field with CTTs and the Slick 32 V6 and soon upcoming V7 training program is conducted completely on a touchscreen, a MERTS system.
Yeah.
And so we're getting technicians out into the fleet that have never laid hands on an actual working system, have never turned a screw except for on a touch screen. And with my experience, I have found that it increases the necessity of on-the-job training for these sailors and their knowledge base when they get to the fleet. And what I wanted to ask is, at what point does modernization become somewhat of a hindrance?
No, it's a great question, and you think of your response too, Meg Pond. My goal on training is I would like to revamp how I actually build sailors to have a more general understanding based on technical stratification of what you do for a living in a more holistic way. And so to the touchscreen thing, I'm not as concerned that the MERTS trainers that you're talking about is how I'm actually training you. I want you to leave that schoolhouse with a general understanding of how the systems work, how the actual troubleshooting equipment from flukes to multimeters, right, to O-scopes work, general practices and troubleshooting and half splitting, how to do that. I should be able to take a good electronic technician, and I'm using that term kind of loosely, and put them on anything in this room. If the sound system in this room didn't work, I would believe that you should be able to troubleshoot that. So there's a general understanding that to be able to get to the actual problem of the system, I should be able to train you to a level of technical competency to go troubleshoot electronic kit. Okay? Now, if I do that, then the second part is what's necessary. And this is where I think is the hardest, will be the harder part. I've got to have a continuing training program on the ship. I just do. If you think that I can rely on something I did 2 years ago for certain sailors, 3 years ago, that they got in some en route school, and that's what's carrying their level of knowledge to troubleshoot on board today, how could that possibly work? You know there would be a decay curve on that. So what's keeping that decay curve at the proper level so that you're actually getting smarter on board? Okay? That has to come from a continuing training program. How many people here are married to someone who is in a profession? Okay? How many people of these people in a profession have to get continuing education units or professional development hours? All of them. So I don't know in what world that we wouldn't do that for the people that are licensed to work on my kit. So that has to be some kind of continuing education program. I think it's woefully adequate in certain communities of our Navy. And the Surface Navy is one of those. So my goal is to try to figure out how to actually make people get smarter when they get on board. So if you're in a continuing training program, you got this general great level of knowledge en route, so you know how to basically utilize kit and troubleshoot, and now your continuing training program, what better way to do that than to actually learn about the system that you're actually on? If I don't do it that way, I've got to go try to solve 38 different baselines at the schoolhouse. If I do it the way you're talking about, that's impossible. So the way I want to do it is generalize this, make you a really smart electrician, a technician, and then the specific continuing training program is tailored to the kit on board your ship, where you actually learn how to go do it there. So, but that means that somebody on board the ship's got to be pretty smart to be the leader of that continuing training program on a work center and divisional basis. And so that's where I've got to go build that level of competency.
Yeah, so what I'll add to what the CNO said is, you know, it depends on what you're using the MERTS trainer for, right? MERTS trainers, we have learned, are very good if what you're trying to train somebody to do is operate a piece of equipment, right? So if that's the point of the training, then it works just fine. It's actually above average. And the nice thing about them is they're reconfigurable, and I can train, you know, a bunch of different systems on them. I think to your point and what the CNO said, they're not great for teaching people how to do maintenance. But we have to get out of again, I'm just foot stomping what the boss said. We have to get out of this paradigm in which I have to train you very specifically on every single piece of equipment that exists. But that's, you know, that was maybe okay back, you know, in the 1960s when we were like the only people in the world working on radars or electronic equipment. That's simply not true today. And so I just have to create people who are very good, have a very deep understanding. Again, we'll use the electronic example of Ohm's law, how to read schematics, put them in a lab, I think to your point, where they have to use test equipment and prove that they know how to do it, but it doesn't have to be on the Slick 32, right? And if I go and I scale that, then when they get to you, to your point, they know how to use a screwdriver and a fluke. So, you know, you're 80% of the way there, and you're teaching them some of the nuances on that particular piece of equipment. What I'll close with on that particular point is, through our time at Fleet Forces, the type commanders have been on a journey, okay, of understanding that they actually own the training for the enlisted people inside of their warfare community, all right? And so all of the type commanders now feel that they own that. And so for everybody in this room, if there is a training deficiency in a rating that you're getting, right, that you think the school needs to start teaching to fundamentally kind of improve what's happening on the waterfront, get that to your type commander N7, because they have a direct feedback loop. They now control the curriculum for A school, C school, right? And so that's if you're not getting what you want in the fleet, let your TICOM N7s know. That loop is much quicker than any of us are used to, where it used to be 5 to 7 years. Okay? Make sense?
Yes, thank you very much, Master Chief.
I don't know. One more.
Good morning, sir. Good morning,
Good
Master
morning.
Chief. I am Operations Specialist Second Class Jonathan Connor from the USS Ralph Johnson. I have a two-part question. First, with the government shutdown, are we still expecting to get our advancement salts sometime this week or next week, or is it going to come later down the road? And then my second question is for my junior sailors. Since I've been in, we went from Navy-wide advancement exams for E4 and above to then having it solely based on evals to then doing what we're doing now with the active duty start date. It's kind of demoralizing to tell my junior sailors when they first come to the ship, congratulations on making seaman, however, you're not going to make third class until 30 months from now. Is there a way that we can do it like we do for seaman recruit to seaman apprentice and then seaman apprentice to seaman, where it's based on their time and rate rather than their active duty start date, to incentivize people to rank up quicker and get the money that they deserve?
Yeah, so we are taking a look at it. That primarily impacts people who come in on an accelerated advancement, right? And so we are taking a look at people who come in on an accelerated advancement, how we can move them through quicker. One of the problems, you know, when CNP made the decision to go to this a couple years ago, is one of the problems we have in our system is we advance through our billet base too quickly, right? And so it was designed, generally this 30-month system, to line up advancement to E4 right about the time you would start thinking about re-enlisting and getting your next set of orders, which could be for an E5 job ashore or at sea. It was to kind of line up those decision points. Like the boss said earlier, you do these things and you think you've thought through everything, and then there's these second and third order impacts that people didn't consider. So we are taking a look at what to do specifically about people who come in on accelerated advancement, and whether or not we want to stay in this current model. The other services are in a very similar model where it's this, you know, kind of 30 months to E4. The other thing I'll tell you is, you know, for me personally, one of the things I think the Navy has lost is the importance of the third-class petty officer. Okay? Third-class petty officer is a non-commissioned officer. Okay? We have a tendency in the Navy throughout my career to lump them in with E1 to E3. Okay? And that's not the, you know, historically that's not the intention of them. All right? And so if you go, I had the opportunity to review a PO 3 and 2 from like 1945. If you were to go read what they expected a third-class petty officer to do in 1945, you'd be shocked. I mean, it was significant. It was a really big deal. And I think we've lost some of that because a petty officer, again, is a non-commissioned officer, which should have, you know, that's the beginning of leadership in the Navy. We're one of the only branches that an E4 is an NCO, right? And so I think there's a balance there. One of the problems we have is our pay table's not great, right? So, you know, we have a tendency to want to accelerate advancement to get people paid a little bit better, and there's a trade-off there in experience and what I can expect them to do. But we are taking a look at it. We are actively involved in trying to figure out whether or not we want to stay here. But for the larger group, I would just encourage you, no matter where we end up on this, you know, think through how you make a petty officer like a real thing again, right? Give that person increased responsibility because it is a big deal, all right? That is a special thing, you know, that is unique to us as a military service. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does, Master Chief. Thank you.
I'm going to wrap up here and just say again, as I started, thank you. Really, it's a privilege. The questions were great. My gosh, that was a wide scope on what's going on, all relevant things that I'm working on, and I wish I had better answers and more resources to get after it more quickly. I think that MCPON hit on what I'll finish with is for all the leaders in here, and you're all at some level of leadership, all of you, push that down. You know, push that down. It is organizational creep that happens over time. It's almost incremental and maybe goes unnoticed, but everybody starts operating at a level kind of lower than they should. It's just the nature of things. And so I would tell you that, you know, find out if you're in command or you're a work center supervisor or wherever you are in the actual C2 structure to push more responsibility down. Take some more risk, okay? You will screw some things up. Okay, but that's part of leadership. All right, so think through it. I didn't say be haphazard, but take some more risk with pushing authority down. Okay, and that's, I think, exactly to the MCPON's point. Again, thank you again for indulging me for some time today. Know that you were seriously, I think about you all the time. I do think about sailors first. That is my key thing that I'm really trying to get after, is to treat you like world-class athletes, because that's the way I think about you every day. So thanks again, and we're going to do a little spot here for the Army-Navy game. So, and you know, when it's time to say, go Navy, beat Army, I want it really loud, okay? All right, team, thank you.